Okay, hey everyone. Um, Welcome back to the Bible for Everyone podcast. I had to fix my audio there, but starting over again, and you didn't miss much. So today we're in the book of Esther, and I wanted to read a Old Testament book on this podcast. So far, this is our second book. We made it through the Gospel of Mark a few days ago, and now I wanted to try Esther. And what interested me about Esther is a few things. Number one is um, she's a female hero, and she really was courageous in saving her people from extermination. In this story, we hear about why the 13th of the month is filled is has like superstitious quality to it. So if you've ever heard someone talk about Friday the 13th, about how bad things can happen on that day, the origin of that superstition is actually in the book of Esther, which is really interesting. So let's get into it today. And today I have my Good News Bible from the Philippines Bible Society. And the Good News translation is not ideal in terms of a literal interpretation of the story, but it's what they call a paraphrase translation, and it's a lot more. It has a much better reputation in terms of other paraphrase translations, like the Message. Um, there's another one that's not coming to mind, but some of them really take too much liberty in conveying the meaning of the story. But the Good News translation is one of my favorites because it it reads like a story. It's very smooth, and it makes sense for people who are new to the Bible like me. While on the other hand, it still cares about the original meaning. Um, it doesn't stray too far away from that, but it does paraphrase in some places. But anyway, that's the story for this Bible, and let's read the introduction, and then I'll start into the story. The events of the Book of Esther, which take place at the winter residence of the Persian emperor, centered around a Jewish heroine named Esther, who by her great courage and devotion to her people saved them from being exterminated by their enemies. The book explains the background and meaning of the Jewish festival of Purim. From the royal throne in Persia's capital city of Susa, King Xerxes ruled over 127 provinces, all the way from India to Ethiopia. In the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his officials and administrators. The armies of Persia and Media were present, as well as the governors and noblemen of the provinces. For 6 whole months he made a show of the riches of the imperial court, with all its splendor and majesty. After that, the king gave a banquet for all the people in the capital city of Susa, rich and poor alike. It lasted a whole week and was held in the gardens of the royal palace. The courtyard there was decorated with blue and white cotton curtains tied by cords of fine purple linen to silver rings on marble columns. Couches made of gold and silver had been placed in the courtyard, which was paved with white marble, red feldspar, shining mother of pearl, and blue turquoise. Drinks were served in golden cups, no two of them alike, and the king was generous with the royal wine. There were no there were no limits on the drinks. The king had given orders to the palace servants that everyone could have as much as they wanted. Meanwhile, inside the royal palace, Queen Vashti was giving a banquet for the women. On the seventh day of his banquet, the king was drinking and feeling happy, so he called in the 7 servants who were his personal assistants: Memnon, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abgatha, Zethar, and Carcass. He ordered them to bring in Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown. The queen was a beautiful woman, and the king wanted to show off her beauty to the officials and all his guests. But when the servants told Queen Vashti of the king's command, she refused to come, and this made the king furious. Now it was the king's custom to ask for expert opinion on questions of law and order, so he called for his advisers, who would know what should be done. Those he most often turned to for advice were Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, 7 officials of Persia and Media who held the highest offices in the kingdom. He said to these men, I, King Xerxes, send my servants to Queen Vashti with a command, and she refused to obey it. What does the law say we should do with her? Then Memucan declared to the king and his officials, Queen Vashti has not only insulted the king, but also his officials. In fact, every man in the empire. Every woman in the empire will start looking down on her husband as soon as she hears what the queen has done. They'll say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to come to him, and she refused to come to him. When the wives of the royal officials of Persia and Media hear about the queen's behavior, they will be telling their husbands about it before the day is out. Wives everywhere will have no respect for their husbands, and husbands will be angry with their wives. If it please your majesty, issue a royal proclamation that Vashti may never again appear before the king. Have it written into the laws of Persia and Media so that it can never be changed. Then give her place as queen to someone better. When your proclamation is made known all over this huge empire, every woman will treat her husband with proper respect, whether he's rich or poor. The king and his officials liked this idea, and the king did what Memucan suggested. To each of the royal provinces he sent a message in the language and the system of writing of that province, saying that every husband should be the master of his home and speak with final authority. So that's chapter 1. What stands out to me is how rich the king was. He threw the banquet for 6 whole months. So it shows how rich he was, and how extravagant that must have been to have a banquet lasting 6 months. And then just the fact that Queen Vashti refused to show off her crown at the party is actually really significant. Had that not happened, the rest of the story wouldn't have happened, because what we'll read in the second chapter is that the king basically divorces Queen Vashti and looks for a new wife who will be Esther. And Esther will save the Jewish people from another villain we're going to meet named Haman. And if that never happened, then Haman's evil plan to um, his evil plan would have never occurred, or it would have went through. So the point of Esther is, in Esther is it's billed as the only book that doesn't mention the Lord directly, and that's true because it gives us a peek into all the behind the scenes things that God orchestrates in the world to bring out his will. And it speaks to his sovereignty, how he controls everything, even if it doesn't appear that way. So even just Queen Vashti refusing to obey the king was actually um, brought out by the Lord because he knew all the future events that were to take place and what needed to happen, and he made sure all those things happened. And that's important to draws parallels to the modern life of sometimes God taking something away where it feels like a loss, but then as we go on in life, we can look back in hindsight and realize that it was actually a gain. So that's something interesting to think about. But it's getting late for me, so let's keep going. And it's a 10-chapter book. So I think we'll probably try to do 5 chapters and then the other 5 chapters later on in the week. So here's chapter 2 now. Drink some tea. I was looking at my YouTube studio, and usually people don't join the live while I'm doing it, but it always gets a couple dozen views after the fact, so it's not a total waste of time. But that's the story with that. Okay, so chapter 2. Later, even after the king's anger had cooled down, he kept thinking about what Vashti had done and about his proclamation against her. So some of the king's advisers who were close to him suggested, "Why don't you make a search to find a new wife? You can appoint officials in every province of the empire and have them bring all these beautiful young women to Susa, the capital city. Put them in the care of Haggai. Then take the woman you like best and make her in Vashti's place." The king thought this was good advice, so he followed it. There in Susa lived a Jew named Mordecai, son of Jair. He was from the tribe of Benjamin and was a descendant of Kish and Shimei. When King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon took Jehoiakim of Judah into exile from Jerusalem, along with a group of captives, Mordecai was among them. He had a cousin named Esther, whose Hebrew name was Hadassah. She was a beautiful young woman, and she had a good figure. At the death of her parents, Mordecai had adopted her and brought her up as his own daughter. When the king had issued his new proclamation, women went to Susa. Esther was among them. She too was put in the royal palace, and she won the favor of Haggai. He lost no time in beginning her beauty treatment and special diet. He gave her the best place and assigned 7 young women specially chosen from the royal palace to serve her. Now, on the advice of Mordecai, Esther had kept it secret that she was Jewish. Every day, Mordecai would walk back and forth in front of the courtyard in order to find out how she was getting along. The regular beauty treatment lasted a year, with oil of myrrh for 6 months, and with oil of balsam for 6 more. After that, they were taken to King Xerxes. She would go there in the morning, and the next morning she would not go to the king again unless he liked her enough to ask for her by name. The time came for Esther to go to the king. Esther, the daughter of Abihail and the cousin of Mordecai, who had adopted her as his daughter. Esther admired by everyone who saw her. When her turn came, she wore just what Haggai advised her to wear. So in Xerxes' 7th year as king, in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, Esther was brought to King Xerxes in the royal palace. The king liked her more than any of the other women, and more than any of the others she won his favor and affection. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet in Esther's honor and invited all his officials and administrators. He proclaimed a holiday for the whole empire and distributed gifts worthy of a king. Meanwhile, Mordecai had been appointed by the king to an administrative position. As for Esther, she had still not let it be known that she was Jewish. Mordecai had told her not to tell anyone, and she obeyed him in this, just as she had obeyed him when she was a little girl under his care. During the time Mordecai held office in the palace, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the palace servants who guarded the entrance to the king's rooms, became hostile to King Xerxes and plotted to assassinate him. Mordecai learned about it and told Queen Esther, who then told the king what Mordecai had found out. There was an investigation, and it was discovered that the report was true, so both men were killed. The king ordered an account of this to be written down in the official records of the empire. Chapter 3. Some time later, King Xerxes promoted a man named Haman to the position of prime minister. Haman was the son of Hammedatha, a descendant of Agag. And Agag is the Canaanites, if that means anything to you. To me, I don't even really know what that means, but I did learn that. The king ordered all the officials in his service to show their respect for Haman by kneeling and bowing to him. They all did so, except for Mordecai, who refused to do it. The other officials in the royal service asked him why he was disobeying the king's command. Day after day they urged him to give in, but he would not listen to them. I am a Jew, he explained, and I cannot bow to Haman. So they told Haman about this, wondering if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct. Haman was furious when he realized that Mordecai was not going to kneel and bow to him, and when he learned that Mordecai was a Jew, he decided to do more than punish Mordecai alone. He made plans to kill every Jew in the whole Persian Empire. So, unfortunately, and really, you can see that the hatred of Jewish people goes back a long, long way. In the 12th year of King Xerxes' rule, in the first month, the month of Nisan, Haman ordered the lots to be cast. And by lots to be cast, that can also mean like rolling dice. That's how we would understand it. Purim they were called, to find out the right day and month to carry out his plot. Okay, so listen to this part, guys. The 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, was decided on. So that sentence right there is the reason why the 13th day of the month is somehow superstitious, because that was the day in the month of Adar when Haman was going to carry out his wicked plan. And that's the origin of that superstition. So Haman told the king, "There is a certain race of people scattered all over your empire and found in every province. They observe customs that are not like those of any other people. Moreover, they do not obey the laws of the empire. So it is not in your best interest to tolerate them. If it please your majesty, issue a decree that they are to be put to death. If you do, I guarantee you that I will be able to put 375 tons of silver into the royal treasury for the administration of the empire." The king took off his ring, which was used to stamp proclamations and make them official, and gave it to the enemy of the Jewish people, Haman, son of Hammedatha, the descendant of Agag. The king told him, "The people and their money are yours. Do as you like with them." Wow, that's terrible. So on the 13th day of the first month, Haman called the king's secretaries and dictated a proclamation to be translated into every language and system of writing used in the empire, and to be sent to all the rulers, governors, and officials. It was issued in the name of King Xerxes and stamped with his ring. Runners took this proclamation to every province of the empire. It contained the instructions that on a single day, the 13th day of Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed. They were to be slaughtered without mercy, and their belongings were to be taken. The contents of the proclamation were to be made public in every province, so that everyone would be prepared when the day came. At the king's command, the decree was made public in the capital city of Susa, and runners carried the news to the provinces. The king and Haman sat down and had a drink, while the city of Susa was being thrown into confusion. So that's the end of chapter 3. And an important thing to consider with this plan of that the Jewish people, they would have heard about it too. And the thing is, there's in the ancient world, there's not a terrible amount of like ways to escape this. You can't just flee. I mean, the Persian Empire at this time was all the way from Ethiopia to India, it says in the first verse. So if you were there in, say, like modern day Saudi Arabia, you couldn't just like leave. And anti-Semitism is really an ancient thing. You can see how furious Haman was that Mordecai wouldn't bow to him. But Mordecai not bowing to Haman was just going to punish him. But then when Haman finds out that he's a Jew, he planned this thing to kill all the Jewish people in all of Persia just because one Jewish man wouldn't bow to him. So you can kind of see the depth of that. Very evil stuff. So let's read chapter 4 and then chapter 5, and then we'll pick up maybe tomorrow or maybe the next day. So chapter 4. When Mordecai learned of all that has been done, he tore his clothes. Oh yeah, and one thing I don't want you to forget in the story is that Mordecai saved the King Xerxes' life when he killed the servants who were plotting to kill the king. So don't forget that. That's a very important detail. When Mordecai learned of all that has been done, he tore his clothes in anguish. Then he dressed in sackcloth, covered his head with ashes, and walked through the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. Until he came to the entrance of the palace, he did not go in, because no one wearing a sackcloth was allowed inside. Throughout all the provinces, wherever the king's proclamation was made known, there was loud mourning among the Jews. They had fasted, wept, wailed, and most of them put on sackcloth and lay in ashes. When Esther's servant woman and, and servants told her what Mordecai was doing, she was deeply disturbed. She sent Mordecai some clothes to put on instead of the sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then she called Hathash, one of the palace servants, appointed as her servant by the king, and told him to go to Mordecai and find out what was happening and why. Hatshach went to Mordecai in the city square at the entrance of the palace. Mordecai told him everything that has happened to him, and just how much money Haman had promised to put into the royal treasury if all the Jews were killed. He gave Hatshach a copy of the proclamation that has been issued in Susa, ordering the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai asked him to take it to Esther, explain the situation to her, and have her go and plead with the king and beg him to have mercy on her people. Hatshach did this, and Esther gave him the message to take back to Mordecai. If any one man or woman goes to the inner courtyard and sees the king without being summoned, that person must die. That is the law. Everyone from the king's advisors to the people in provinces know that. There is only one way to get around this law. If the king holds out his gold scepter to someone, then that person's life is spared. But it has been a month since the king has sent for me. When Mordecai received Esther's message, he sent her this warning. Don't imagine that you are safer than any other Jew just because you are in the royal palace. If you keep quiet at a time like this, help will come from heaven to the Jews, and they will be saved. But you will die, and your father's family will come to an end. Yet, who knows, maybe it was for a time like this that you were made queen. Esther sent Mordecai this reply. Go and get all the Jews in Susa together. Hold a fast and pray for me. Don't eat or drink anything for 3 days and nights. My servant women and I will be doing the same. After that, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. If I must die for doing it, I will die. Mordecai then left and did everything that Esther had told him to do. So another few points to discuss. If you've ever heard someone say, if I perish, I perish, that's not a super common phrase, but it's a phrase in American culture, I think, and just around in English languages. That is from Esther saying, if I die, I will die. And the other thing to consider is, oh yeah, the other common phrase is, I think even in like health and diet, people will call a 3-day fast an Esther fast. And an Esther fast is when you don't drink or eat for 3 days and nights. Well, not drinking for 3 days is probably not smart, but to not. But she wasn't doing it for. She was doing it to as like a sacrifice to God, which is how a lot of people do fasting. Um, in the Christian and I guess the Jewish world too. So let's read out chapter 5 and then I'll log off. Chapter 5. On the third day of her fast, Esther put on her royal robes and went and stood in the inner courtyard of the palace, facing the throne room. The king was inside, seated on the royal throne facing the entrance. When the king saw Queen Esther standing outside, she won his favor and he held out to her the gold scepter. She then came up and touched the tip of it. What is it, Queen Esther? The king asked. Tell me what you want, and you shall have it, even if it is half my empire. Esther replied, If it please your majesty, I would like you and Haman to be my guests tonight at a banquet I am preparing for you. The king then ordered Haman to come quickly so that they could be Esther's guests. So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. Over the wine, the king asked her, Tell me what you want, and you shall have it. I will grant your request, even if you ask for half my empire. Esther replied, If your majesty is kind enough to grant my request, I would like you and Haman to be my guests tomorrow at another banquet that I will prepare for you. At that time I will tell you what I want. When Haman left the banquet, he was happy and in a good mood. But when he saw Mordecai at the entrance of the palace, and when Mordecai did not rise or show any sign of respect as he passed, Haman was furious with him. But he controlled himself and went on home. Then he invited his friends to his house and asked his wife Zeresh to join them. He boasted to them about how rich he was, how many sons he had, how the king had promoted him to a high office, and how much more important he was than any of the king's other officials. What is more, Haman went on, Queen Esther gave a banquet for no one but the king and me, and we are invited back tomorrow. But none of this means a thing to me as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the entrance of the palace. So his wife and all his friends suggested to kill Mordecai. And then you can go to the banquet happy. Haman thought this was a good idea. So Esther had her first banquet. And it's not really described in this translation, but she doesn't let out what actually happened at the banquet. But then when Haman leaves, he sees Mordecai, who's obviously depressed because of the plot to kill all the Jewish people in Persia, and it just fills him with rage. And so tomorrow he's planning on killing Mordecai. And that's kind of a cliffhanger to leave off at. But that's all I have time for tonight. So if you're watching this after the live is already ended, feel free to share your thoughts. If you want to come on to the Bible for Everyone podcast, you can leave a comment or send me an email, and we can talk about your faith journey, whatever religion you are, your relationship with the Bible, anything of a spiritual nature would interest me, and I think my audience would benefit from. So I'll end it there, and I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.